The coffee cup shattered against the laboratory floor as Dr. Sarah Chen stumbled backward from her workstation. The radio telescope array at the Meridian Observatory had been scanning deep space for 17 years, searching for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth. In all that time, they had detected nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional pulsar. Until now. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The signal wasn't coming from some distant galaxy billions of light years away. It was broadcasting from just outside Earth's atmosphere, clear and strong, in perfect mathematical sequences that could only mean one thing: someone was trying to communicate. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency contact protocol, her mind racing through the implications of what she had just discovered. Within minutes, the sterile corridors of the Meridian Observatory buzzed with activity. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, the facility's director, arrived still wearing his jogging clothes after Sarah's frantic call interrupted his morning run. Behind him came Dr. Lisa Park, their senior linguist, clutching a tablet loaded with every decryption algorithm they had developed over the years. The signal repeated every 12 minutes with mathematical precision. Prime numbers, followed by the Fibonacci sequence, then geometric progressions that any intelligent species would recognize as universal constants. It was the cosmic equivalent of knocking on humanity's door, polite but unmistakably deliberate. Dr. Chen replayed the recording for the third time, watching her colleagues' faces shift from skepticism to wonder to barely contained excitement. The implications were staggering. After decades of searching, humanity had finally received proof that they were not alone in the universe. The breakthrough came when Dr. Park noticed subtle variations in the signal's frequency. Hidden within the mathematical sequences was another layer of communication, more complex patterns that seemed almost linguistic in nature. As she fed the data through their most sophisticated analysis software, fragments of meaning began to emerge. Director Rodriguez immediately activated the observatory's emergency protocols. Secure lines connected them to government agencies across the globe, from NASA headquarters to the European Space Agency, from the Russian space program to the emerging programs in Asia and Africa. Within hours, the discovery had reached the highest levels of every major government on Earth. The world's leading experts in astronomy, linguistics, and communications descended upon the Meridian Observatory like pilgrims to a sacred site. Dr. James Wilson from MIT arrived with advanced decryption equipment. Professor Elena Volkov from Moscow brought decades of experience in xenolinguistics, a field that had been purely theoretical until this moment. Dr. Raj Patel from the Indian Space Research Organization contributed his expertise in quantum communications theory. As the international team worked around the clock, the signal continued its patient repetition. But on the third day, something changed. The mathematical sequences remained the same, but the underlying linguistic patterns had evolved, becoming more sophisticated and nuanced. It was as if the broadcasters were learning from humanity's attempts to decode their message, adapting their communication style to make contact easier. Dr. Park made the crucial discovery during her 14th consecutive hour at the workstation. The variations in frequency weren't random at all. They corresponded to fundamental concepts that any technological civilization would understand: energy, mass, time, distance. The broadcasters were teaching humanity their language through shared scientific principles. The first successful translation came at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday that would be remembered as the most important day in human history. Dr. Chen was alone in the observatory when the computers finally cracked the linguistic code. The message that appeared on her screen was simple, elegant, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Greetings to the inhabitants of the third planet. We are the Galactic Preservation Council. We have observed your species' development with great interest. The time has come to offer you our protection. Dr. Chen stared at the words until they seemed to blur together. Protection. The word carried implications that sent chills down her spine. Protection from what? Why did an advanced alien civilization believe that humanity needed their help? What dangers existed in the galaxy that Earth's people couldn't even imagine? She immediately contacted Director Rodriguez, who arrived at the observatory within 30 minutes despite the early hour. Together, they watched as more messages began flowing through the communication array, each one adding new layers to the initial offer. Your species has reached a critical stage in its development, the messages continued. You have begun to explore beyond your planet's atmosphere. You have developed nuclear technology. You have started to broadcast signals into space. These achievements mark you as an emerging civilization, but they also expose you to threats that young species cannot comprehend alone. The messages came with mathematical proofs and scientific data that demonstrated the broadcasters' technological superiority. They showed detailed knowledge of Earth's geography, population, and technological capabilities. They knew about humanity's space stations, their communication networks, their military capabilities. The level of surveillance implied by this knowledge was both impressive and deeply unsettling. Dr. Rodriguez initiated the expanded contact protocols, bringing in representatives from the United Nations, major world governments, and international scientific organizations. The Meridian Observatory transformed overnight from a quiet research facility into the focal point of humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. President Anderson arrived via helicopter on Thursday morning, accompanied by Secretary of State Patricia Williams and General Robert Hayes, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Similar delegations from other major powers followed throughout the day, turning the observatory's parking lot into an impromptu landing zone for government aircraft from around the world. The Galactic Preservation Council's messages became more detailed and persuasive with each transmission. They described themselves as an ancient organization dedicated to guiding younger civilizations through the dangerous early stages of galactic awareness. They claimed to have shepherded hundreds of species through this critical period, helping them avoid the catastrophic mistakes that had destroyed countless other worlds. Their offer was comprehensive and seemed almost too generous to be real. Advanced technology that would solve Earth's energy problems overnight. Medical knowledge that could eliminate most diseases and extend human lifespans by centuries. Transportation systems that would make interstellar travel as simple as crossing an ocean. Environmental restoration techniques that could reverse climate change and restore damaged ecosystems within decades. In exchange, they asked for very little. Earth would accept the Council's guidance on matters of galactic importance. Humanity would agree to certain restrictions on their military development and space exploration activities. They would participate in the Council's monitoring programs to ensure their world remains stable and peaceful. The proposal included detailed technical specifications for the protective systems they would install around Earth, orbital defense platforms that could neutralize any threat from space, early warning networks that would detect danger from light years away, communication relays that would connect Earth to the galactic community of protected worlds. Dr. Wilson spent hours analyzing the technical data, his excitement growing with each calculation. The technology described in the Council's messages was centuries ahead of anything humanity had developed. The energy generation systems alone could transform human civilization, providing clean, unlimited power that would end scarcity and environmental destruction forever. Professor Volkov focused on the linguistic aspects of the communications, noting the subtle sophistication of the Council's language patterns. They demonstrated knowledge of human psychology and communication styles that suggested they had been studying Earth's broadcasts for decades, possibly centuries. Their messages were crafted to appeal to humanity's highest aspirations while addressing their deepest fears. Dr. Patel worked with government cryptographers to verify the authenticity of the Council's scientific claims. Every equation checked out perfectly. Every technological specification was consistent with advanced physics principles that human scientists had only begun to theorize about. The Council's knowledge was undeniably real and far beyond anything Earth could produce independently. As the days passed, the Council's messages began including visual elements, complex diagrams and images that showed the protective systems in operation around other worlds. Earth scientists saw planets surrounded by elegant orbital platforms, their surfaces green and thriving under the Council's protection. They saw civilizations that had accepted the Council's guidance, living in apparent peace and prosperity. The images were beautiful and compelling, showing worlds where war had been eliminated, where poverty was unknown, where every citizen enjoyed the benefits of advanced technology and unlimited resources. The Council's protected species seemed to live in perfect harmony with their environments and with each other. But Dr. Chen found herself troubled by subtle details in these visual presentations. The protected worlds all seemed remarkably similar in their social structures and technological implementations. The orbital platforms around each planet followed identical designs. Even the cities and settlements showed a uniformity that seemed inconsistent with the natural diversity of different species and cultures. She brought her concerns to Dr. Park, who had been analyzing the linguistic patterns in the Council's messages with increasing unease. There were subtle consistencies in the communication style that suggested all the messages were coming from the same source, despite claims that they represented the collective voice of a diverse galactic council. More troubling was the Council's response to specific questions about the nature of the threats they claimed to protect against. When Earth's representatives asked for details about these galactic dangers, the Council's answers became vague and philosophical, rather than concrete and scientific. The galaxy contains forces that young civilizations cannot comprehend, they explained. Ancient entities that corrupt the development of emerging species, rogue civilizations that spread chaos and destruction, cosmic phenomena that can destroy entire star systems without warning. Our protection shields developing worlds from these terrible realities. Dr. Chen noticed that the Council never provided specific examples of these threats. They never named the ancient entities or rogue civilizations they claimed to guard against. They never offered scientific data about the cosmic phenomena that supposedly threatened unprotected worlds. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For an organization that demonstrated advanced scientific knowledge in every other area, their explanations of galactic threats remained frustratingly non-specific. Director Rodriguez organized daily briefings where Earth's best minds could share their findings and concerns. The sessions brought together scientists, diplomats, military strategists, and intelligence analysts from dozens of countries. The diversity of perspectives proved invaluable as humanity struggled to understand the implications of the Council's offer. General Hayes raised strategic concerns about the military restrictions the Council proposed. The limitations on weapons development and space exploration activities were extensive, effectively preventing humanity from developing any significant defensive capabilities of their own. While the Council's protection seemed comprehensive, it would leave Earth completely dependent on their alien guardians for security. Secretary Williams focused on the diplomatic implications, noting that acceptance of the Council's offer would fundamentally alter humanity's position in any future galactic community. Earth would enter interstellar politics not as an independent civilization, but as a protected client state under the Council's authority. Professor Margaret Thompson, a historian from Oxford University who had been brought in to provide historical perspective, pointed out disturbing parallels between the Council's offer and various protection rackets throughout human history. The pattern was always the same. A powerful organization would identify threats to a weaker group, offer protection from those threats, and gradually assume control over the protected party's affairs. Dr. David Kim, a psychologist specializing in decision-making under uncertainty, noted that the Council's communication strategy was designed to create a sense of urgency and dependence. By emphasizing the dangers that awaited unprotected civilizations while remaining vague about the specific nature of those threats, they were encouraging humanity to make a decision based on fear rather than rational analysis. The Council's messages began to carry subtle undertones of impatience as Earth's leaders continued their deliberations. While they maintained their polite and helpful demeanor, there were increasingly frequent references to the dangers of delay and the limited window of opportunity for accepting their protection. Other civilizations have hesitated too long, one message warned. By the time they recognized the wisdom of our offer, the threats we guard against had already begun to corrupt their development. We would hate to see humanity suffer the same fate due to excessive caution. These implications troubled many of Earth's representatives, but they also raised important questions about the nature of the decision they faced. If the Council's protection was genuinely beneficial, why did they need to pressure humanity into accepting it? Why couldn't they simply present their evidence and allow Earth's people to make an informed choice without time constraints? Dr. Chen found herself spending long hours staring at the radio telescope array, thinking about the implications of humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. She had dreamed of this moment since childhood, imagining the wonder and excitement of discovering that Earth was not alone in the universe. The reality was proving far more complex and troubling than her youthful fantasies had anticipated. The technical data provided by the Council was undeniably impressive, demonstrating capabilities that would transform human civilization beyond recognition. But the organization's reluctance to provide specific information about the threats they claim to guard against suggested that there might be more to their offer than simple altruistic protection. As Earth's leaders continued their deliberations, ordinary people around the world watched and waited for news about humanity's response to the Council's offer. The existence of the alien communication had been disclosed to the public after the first week, sparking global debates about the implications of accepting or rejecting the Council's protection. Some argued that humanity should embrace this opportunity to join a galactic community and benefit from advanced alien technology. Others worried about the loss of independence and the unknown consequences of placing Earth under alien authority. Religious leaders debated the theological implications of contact with non-human intelligence. Philosophers questioned what acceptance of the Council's offer would mean for human identity and autonomy. The Council's messages continued to arrive with mechanical regularity, each one adding new details to their comprehensive offer while maintaining the same vague descriptions of the threats they claimed to guard against. They provided technical specifications for orbital defense platforms, medical treatments that could extend human lifespans, and energy systems that could power human civilization for millennia. But they remained frustratingly evasive when asked direct questions about the specific nature of the galactic dangers that made their protection necessary. Their responses suggested vast knowledge and concern for humanity's welfare, but they never provided the concrete evidence that would allow Earth's scientists and leaders to independently verify their claims. Dr. Park made a disturbing discovery during her analysis of the Council's communication patterns. Hidden within the complex linguistic structures of their messages were subtle command phrases and psychological triggers designed to influence human decision-making processes. The alien communicators were not simply presenting information, they were actively attempting to manipulate humanity's response to their offer. When she shared this finding with the international team, it sparked intense debate about the Council's true intentions. Were these manipulation techniques simply the result of their advanced understanding of psychology, used to help humanity make the right decision for their own benefit? Or did they suggest that the Council had ulterior motives that they preferred to keep hidden? The discovery of psychological manipulation techniques in the Council's messages marked a turning point in humanity's evaluation of their offer. What had initially seemed like generous assistance from benevolent aliens began to look more like a sophisticated attempt at conquest through psychological coercion. Dr. Chen organized a secure meeting with the core leadership team to discuss their findings and plan their next steps. The evidence was mounting that the Galactic Preservation Council might not be the altruistic organization they claimed to be, but proving their suspicions and determining the best course of action would require careful investigation and international cooperation. The weight of humanity's future rested on their shoulders as they prepared to dig deeper into the Council's offer and search for the truth behind their promises of protection. The question that had troubled Dr. Chen from the beginning remained unanswered and more urgent than ever. Protection from what exactly did the Council believe humanity needed? Commander Thompson's shuttle had barely docked at the International Space Station when encrypted communications began flooding Earth's networks. Her preliminary report sent shockwaves through every government facility on the planet. But it was Dr. Elena Rodriguez at the Deep Space Research Institute who made the discovery that changed everything. Working through the night in her laboratory in Chile, Dr. Rodriguez had been analyzing decades of archived telescope data, searching for evidence of the cosmic threats the Protection Council claimed to guard against. What she found instead was far more disturbing. "Director Walsh," she called out, her voice echoing through the empty corridors of the research facility. "You need to see this immediately." Director Benjamin Walsh arrived within minutes, still wearing his pajamas under a hastily thrown-on lab coat. Dr. Rodriguez had pulled up star charts covering the past 50 years of deep space observations, with anomalies highlighted in red across dozens of star systems. "Look at the pattern," she said, pointing to the display. "These aren't random cosmic events. Every single one of these systems showed signs of advanced civilization in our earlier surveys. Radio emissions, artificial energy signatures, orbital structures." Then suddenly, complete silence. Walsh studied the data with growing alarm. "How many systems are we talking about?" 47 confirmed civilizations that went completely dark over the past half-century. But here's the terrifying part. Dr. Rodriguez overlaid another data set. In each case, approximately 18 months before the silence, we detected massive energy signatures moving into those systems. Signatures that match exactly what we're seeing from the Guardian fleet. The implications hit Walsh like a physical blow. The Protection Council isn't protecting civilizations from threats. They are the threat. Dr. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Every species that accepted their protection disappeared from our sensors within 2 years. We've been watching systematic extinction disguised as benevolent aid. While Dr. Rodriguez was uncovering the Protection Council's bloody history, Dr. Marcus King at the Oxford Xenobiology Institute was making his own chilling discoveries. The biological samples Commander Thompson had secretly collected during her visit to the alien flagship told a story that made his hands shake as he recorded his findings. The genetic material from the various protected species shows clear signs of systematic modification, he dictated to his research assistant, Dr. Ann Foster. Neural pathways have been altered to suppress aggression, creativity, and independent thought. What we witnessed wasn't peaceful coexistence. It was lobotomization on a species-wide scale. Dr. Foster reviewed the microscopic images with mounting horror. The modifications are so precise, so thorough. They've turned entire civilizations into biological robots. It gets worse, Dr. King continued. The modifications are progressive. Early-stage samples show minimal alteration, but specimens from species under protection for longer periods show increasingly severe neural dampening. They're not just controlling these species. They're slowly erasing everything that made them sentient beings. Meanwhile, in a secure facility beneath the Swiss Alps, the world's most powerful leaders were grappling with intelligence reports that painted an increasingly dire picture. President Vasquez sat at the head of a conference table surrounded by holographic displays showing the Guardian fleet's positions, while Chancellor Weber and Prime Minister Nakamura participated via encrypted video links. The evidence is overwhelming, reported Director Susan Blake of Global Intelligence Services. The Protection Council operates like a cosmic predator species. They identify developing civilizations, offer protection from fabricated threats, then systematically dismantle everything that makes those species independent. General Hayes activated a tactical display showing the Guardian fleet's current formation. Our analysis indicates they're not just maintaining position, they're actively scanning our defensive capabilities. Every military installation, every space-based platform, every communications satellite, they're preparing for conquest, not negotiation. Dr. Patricia Kim, Earth's leading expert on interstellar civilizations, had spent the past 3 days analyzing every piece of available data about the Protection Council's operations. Her conclusions were unequivocal. Based on the pattern of civilizations going silent, the Protection Council processes approximately 12 to 15 species per Earth year. They've been doing this for centuries, possibly millennia. We're looking at the most successful genocidal operation in galactic history. The room fell silent as the scope of the threat became clear. Humanity wasn't just facing conquest. They were facing complete extinction disguised as salvation. Chancellor Weber was the first to speak. Do we have any military options at all? General Hayes pulled up classified defense assessments. Conventional warfare is impossible. Their technology is too advanced. Their numbers too overwhelming. But we've identified potential vulnerabilities in their operational patterns. Such as? President Vasquez asked. Overconfidence, the general replied. They've been operating the same way for so long that they've become predictable. They expect species to either submit immediately or put up token resistance before being crushed. They're not prepared for asymmetric warfare. Prime Minister Nakamura leaned forward in his video feed. What kind of asymmetric warfare are we talking about? Dr. Rachel Thompson, Earth's chief military strategist, had been working on exactly that question. We can't fight their ships directly, but we might be able to exploit their psychological weaknesses. They see themselves as benevolent saviors. They need subject species to believe in their legitimacy. If we can shatter that illusion publicly, it might destabilize their entire system. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency communication from Dr. Rodriguez in Chile. Her face appeared on the main screen, eyes wide with urgency. Leaders, I've made contact with survivors, she announced, causing immediate silence in the room. There are resistance movements on worlds the Protection Council claimed to have pacified. They've been hiding, waiting for someone to challenge the Council's narrative. President Vasquez felt her pulse quicken. How did you reach them? Hidden in the Council's own communication networks, Dr. Rodriguez explained. They use quantum entanglement for instantaneous galactic communication, but the system has vulnerabilities. I've been in contact with 3 separate resistance groups, and they've all been monitoring our situation. Chancellor Weber asked the crucial question. What do they know about fighting the Protection Council? Dr. Rodriguez's expression grew grim. They know a great deal about losing to them. But they have also learned something important. The Council's greatest weakness is their need for voluntary submission. Forced conquest costs them enormous resources and creates ongoing instability. They prefer psychological manipulation over military action. This intelligence transformed the strategic discussion. If the Protection Council preferred willing subjects over conquered ones, it meant their overwhelming force was as much bluff as genuine threat. Dr. Kim had been analyzing the aliens' communication patterns since first contact. Notice how they keep emphasizing choice and voluntary acceptance. They're trying to make us complicit in our own subjugation. If we refuse to play their game, if we force them to reveal their true nature publicly, it undermines their entire operational model. General Hayes understood the implications immediately. You're suggesting we call their bluff. More than that, Doctor, Thompson replied. We're suggesting we turn their own methods against them. They use fear of cosmic threats to justify protection. What if we revealed that they are the cosmic threat? The plan that emerged from that meeting was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of trying to fight the Guardian fleet directly, Earth would expose the Protection Council's true nature to every monitoring civilization in the galaxy. They would transform humanity's resistance into a galactic awakening. Dr. Sandra Lee, Earth's most skilled xenolinguist, was tasked with crafting a message that would resonate across species barriers. Working with the resistance groups Dr. Rodriguez had contacted, she began developing a communication that could reach every civilized world simultaneously. The key is universal concepts, she explained to her team. Ideas that transcend specific biology or culture, the desire for freedom, the recognition of deception, the courage to resist overwhelming force. These themes resonate with any sentient species. Meanwhile, Commander Thompson was preparing for what might be humanity's final diplomatic contact with the Protection Council. The plan required her to return to the Guardian fleet, not to negotiate, but to force Speaker Thorne to reveal his true intentions before the watching galaxy. Remember, President Vasquez told her during the final briefing, everything you say will be broadcast to every resistance group in known space. Your job isn't to convince Thorne, it's to let him convince everyone else of what he really is. Dr. Chen had spent hours preparing technical questions designed to expose the logical contradictions in the Protection Council's narrative. Ask him about the species that refused protection. Ask for specific examples of the threats they faced. Make him explain why every threat somehow requires the same solution. Captain Rodriguez would handle military aspects, probing the Council's actual defensive capabilities versus their claimed protection methods. Their story falls apart if you examine the details. No legitimate protective force would need to modify the species they're protecting. As Commander Thompson's shuttle approached the Guardian fleet for the second time, the weight of humanity's future pressed down on her shoulders. In 12 hours, Earth would deliver its answer to the Protection Council's offer. But first, the galaxy needed to understand what that offer really meant. The docking procedure proceeded exactly as before, with the same unsettling sense that alien technology was controlling their every movement. Speaker Thorne waited in the same location, wearing the same pleasant expression, as if the previous meeting had never raised any uncomfortable questions. Commander Thompson, he greeted her warmly, I trust your leaders have had sufficient time to consider our generous offer. They have, she replied carefully. But they've asked me to clarify some details before making their final decision. Of course, Thorne said, gesturing for her to follow. I am always happy to address concerns. But this time, Commander Thompson noticed things she had missed before. The protected species they encountered moved with subtle uniformity. Their responses too similar, their expressions too controlled. The beautiful gardens and flowing water couldn't disguise the essential lifelessness of the beings who tended them. Speaker Thorne, she began as they walked, you mentioned that some species refuse protection and face tragic consequences. Could you give us specific examples? For the first time, Thorne's pace faltered slightly. The details are disturbing, Commander. I would prefer to focus on positive outcomes. But understanding the threats is crucial for our decision, she pressed. What exactly happened to the species that refused your help? Thorne stopped walking and turned to face her. his large eyes showing the first hint of annoyance. They were consumed by the very forces we offered to protect them from. The devourers stripped their worlds bare. The mind corruptors turned them into savage beasts. Is this really what you wish to hear? Commander Thompson activated her recording device, knowing that every word was being transmitted to the resistance networks across the galaxy. Yes, Speaker Thorne. We need to understand these threats to make an informed choice. What followed was a masterclass in revealing deception through persistent questioning. The more details Commander Thompson requested, the more vague and contradictory Thorne's explanations became. His descriptions of cosmic threats sounded increasingly like propaganda, designed to frighten rather than inform. These devourers you mention, she said. How do your protective measures defend against them specifically? We maintain defensive perimeters, Thorne replied stiffly. Our ships patrol threatened regions. But how do you know where they'll strike next? What early warning systems do you use? The questions continued, each one designed to expose another inconsistency in the Protection Council's narrative. With each exchange, Thorne became more frustrated, his benevolent mask slipping further. Finally, Commander Thompson asked the question that shattered the pretense entirely. Speaker Thorne, in your protection of these hundreds of species, have any of them ever successfully defended themselves against these threats without your help? The alien stared at her for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice had lost all pretense of warmth. No species can survive these threats alone, Commander. That is why protection is not optional. It is necessary for galactic stability. Not optional? Commander Thompson repeated, making sure the recording captured every word. Are you saying that species don't actually have a choice in accepting your protection? Thorne's expression had become cold and calculating. Choice is an illusion for species that lack the wisdom to choose correctly. The Protection Council exists to make the necessary decisions that ensure galactic peace. Peace through forced subjugation? Peace through order, Thorne snapped, abandoning all pretense. Chaotic species like yours threaten the stability of everything we have built. Your aggression, your unpredictability, your refusal to accept guidance. These traits make you dangerous to yourselves and others. Commander Thompson felt a chill of triumph. The mask was off completely now. So the threats you protect against, they're species like us? Species that refuse to surrender their independence? Species that refuse to evolve beyond their primitive impulses, Thorne confirmed. Yes, Commander. We protect the galaxy from the chaos that uncontrolled species inevitably create. The admission hung in the air between them like a death sentence. The Protection Council wasn't defending against cosmic threats. They were eliminating any species that might challenge their control. And if Earth refuses your protection? Commander Thompson asked quietly. Thorne's large eyes glittered with cold certainty. Then Earth will join the other chaotic species in extinction. The galaxy cannot afford to let dangerous elements spread their disorder. Commander Thompson stood slowly, her mission complete. Thank you for clarifying the Council's position, Speaker Thorne. Earth will have its answer shortly. As she walked back toward the docking bay, she could feel Thorne's gaze burning into her back. The alien had realized too late that he had been manipulated into revealing the truth, but the damage was done. Across the galaxy, resistance groups had heard the Protection Council's true representative admit to systematic genocide disguised as benevolent protection. The shuttle journey back to Earth felt like traveling toward either salvation or doom. Commander Thompson had accomplished her mission. The galaxy now knew what the Protection Council really was. But knowing the truth and surviving it were two very different things. Yes, Earth's blue marble grew larger in the viewport. She wondered if this would be humanity's last day of freedom, or the first day of a galactic war for liberation. The answer would come in less than 6 hours, when President Vasquez delivered humanity's response to the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Either way, there would be no going back. President Elena Vasquez stood before the assembled cameras in the United Nations Security Chamber, knowing that her next words would either doom humanity to extinction or spark the greatest rebellion in galactic history. Behind her, the flags of every Earth nation created a backdrop of unified defiance that had never existed before in human history. The Guardian fleet waited at the edge of the solar system, 47 massive vessels that could reduce Earth to ash within hours. But they were no longer the only audience for humanity's decision. Hidden across the galaxy, resistance movements on dozens of worlds were monitoring this moment, waiting to see if one small species would dare to challenge an empire that had ruled unopposed for millennia. Speaker Marcus Thorne of the so-called Protection Council, President Vasquez began, her voice carrying across every communication channel in known space. Humanity has reached its decision regarding your offer of guardianship. In the depths of space, aboard the flagship Harmony, Speaker Thorne watched the transmission with growing confidence. Every species eventually accepted the inevitable. The alternative was simply too terrible to contemplate. "We reject your protection," President Vasquez declared, her words echoing through the void between stars. "We reject your guidance. We reject your authority over our world and our destiny." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across light years. Then President Vasquez continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "But more than that, we reject the lie that has poisoned this galaxy for centuries. There are no cosmic threats that require your protection. There are no ancient evils that justify your control. There is only you, the Protection Council, systematically destroying every species that dares to think for itself." Across the galaxy, on worlds where resistance fighters had hidden in shadows for generations, beings who had given up hope suddenly felt their hearts racing with possibility. Someone was finally speaking the truth. "We have evidence," President Vasquez continued, "of 47 civilizations that mysteriously went silent after accepting your protection. We have recordings of your own Speaker Thorne admitting that you eliminate species that refuse to surrender their independence. We have biological proof that your protection involves lobotomizing entire populations to make them compliant." Speaker Thorne's pleasant expression had vanished completely, replaced by cold fury. Around him, the bridge crew of the Harmony began activating weapon systems that had crushed countless worlds. "The galaxy will know what you really are," President Vasquez declared. "Every species will understand that your protection is slavery, your peace is death, and your empire is built on the bones of free civilizations." Dr. Sandra Lee's carefully crafted message began broadcasting simultaneously on every frequency, in every language pattern that xenolinguists had decoded over the past century. The mathematical proofs, the historical evidence, the biological data, all of it transmitted to every corner of known space in formats that any technological species could understand. On the Kepler prison world, Commander Vex of the Alterian resistance movement felt hope surge through him as he watched the human transmission. For 20 years, he had waited for this moment, a species with the courage to speak truth to power. "Attention all resistance cells," he broadcast on hidden frequencies that the Protection Council had never detected. "The humans have lit the fire. It's time to fan the flames." Similar messages echoed across dozens of star systems, as underground movements that had operated in isolation suddenly realized they were part of a vast network of resistance. The Protection Council's greatest secret, that rebellion was widespread, was finally being revealed. Speaker Thorne activated the Harmony's main communication array, his voice broadcasting with the authority of absolute power. "People of Earth, you have chosen chaos over order. Your transmission of lies and propaganda will not save you from the consequences of your decision." President Vasquez smiled grimly as she delivered humanity's final message. "We choose freedom over security, truth over comfortable lies, and dignity over survival. If that makes us chaotic, then let chaos reign." The transmission ended, and across Earth, 7 billion people held their breath as they waited to see if their leader's defiance would bring salvation or annihilation. Speaker Thorne issued his orders with icy precision. "All fleet units, advance to Earth orbital positions. Prepare planetary pacification protocols. This rebellion ends now." But as the Guardian fleet began moving toward Earth, Dr. Rachel Thompson's asymmetric warfare plan was already in motion. Humanity couldn't match the aliens' firepower, but they could exploit weaknesses that an empire accustomed to easy victories had never addressed. Captain Maria Santos, commanding Earth's orbital defense network, watched the approaching alien ships with calm determination. Her weapons were primitive compared to theirs, But they had one crucial advantage: unpredictability. All defense stations, implement pattern Omega, she ordered. Remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to cost them everything. The first Guardian ships to enter Earth's orbital space encountered something they had never faced before: weapons that deliberately missed their targets. Missiles that seemed to malfunction, energy beams that fired wide, defensive systems that appeared to be catastrophically inept. The alien commanders, accustomed to overwhelming displays of technological superiority, initially assumed they were facing primitive resistance that would collapse within minutes. They moved their ships into optimal bombardment positions, following tactical patterns that had worked flawlessly for thousands of years. That's when humanity revealed its first surprise. The malfunctioning missiles suddenly changed course, using gravitational assists from Earth's moon to strike the Guardian ships from impossible angles. The inept energy weapons had been herding the alien vessels into precisely calculated positions where Earth's orbital debris field became a weapon itself. "What are they doing?" demanded the commander of the Guardian vessel Serenity as his ship was struck by a coordinated barrage of kinetic projectiles. "These tactics make no sense." That was exactly the point. The Protection Council's forces were designed to fight rational opponents who valued their ships and crews above all else. They weren't prepared for enemies who treated their own vessels as disposable weapons. Commander Lisa Park, pilot of the converted cargo hauler Defiant Spirit, flew her ship directly into the energy beam of a Guardian cruiser, using her hull as a shield to protect 3 smaller vessels behind her. As her ship disintegrated around her, she transmitted her final message with fierce joy. "Tell them this is what freedom looks like." Her sacrifice allowed the other ships to deliver their payloads, not explosive weapons, but communication arrays that began broadcasting the evidence of Protection Council genocide to every monitoring station in the galaxy. Similar scenes played out across Earth's orbital space as human crews made impossible choices with impossible courage. They couldn't defeat the Guardian fleet, but they could ensure that every moment of the battle was transmitted to the watching galaxy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, still at her observatory in Chile, coordinated the most important aspect of the entire battle: documentation. Every Guardian ship's tactical response, every weapon signature, every communication protocol was being recorded and analyzed in real time. "They're following the same patterns they've used for centuries," she reported to resistance groups across the galaxy. "Watch how they position their command ships. See how they route their communications. Their technology is advanced, but their thinking is fossilized." On the world of Terran 5, the underground resistance movement led by Dr. Keth Vorn watched the human battle with growing excitement. For the first time, they were seeing Protection Council forces struggle against an enemy that refused to fight by established rules. "Look at their formation disruption," Dr. Vorn pointed out to his team. "The humans are exploiting something we never noticed. The Council ships can't adapt to random tactics because their crews have been conditioned to expect predictable responses. This intelligence spread through resistance networks faster than Council ships could intercept it." Suddenly, beings who had hidden in fear for generations realized that their oppressors had critical vulnerabilities. The battle for Earth orbit lasted only 3 hours, but its effects rippled across the galaxy for decades. When the last human defense platform fell silent, Speaker Thorne might have claimed victory, but the cost had been devastating to the Protection Council's aura of invincibility. 12 Guardian ships had been destroyed or severely damaged by primitive weapons wielded by beings who should have surrendered without firing a shot. More importantly, the entire galaxy had watched the Protection Council's forces struggle against an enemy that fought with creativity rather than doctrine. But humanity's greatest victory came not from the space battle, but from the ground. As Guardian troop transports descended toward Earth's major cities, they encountered resistance unlike anything in the Protection Council's historical records. Carl Johnson, still a construction worker at heart, led teams that turned every building into a fortress and every street into a trap. The aliens had expected organized military units that could be defeated through superior firepower and tactical coordination. Instead, they found 7 billion individuals who seemed to take personal offense at the suggestion that they needed protection. In New York, office workers used building ventilation systems to outmaneuver alien soldiers equipped with technology that could detect any conventional military threat. In London, University students turned subway tunnels into an underground network that allowed resistance fighters to appear and disappear like ghosts. The Protection Council's ground forces were designed to pacify populations that had been psychologically conditioned to accept authority. They had no protocols for dealing with humans who responded to conquest attempts by becoming more dangerous rather than more compliant. "These beings are insane," reported Commander Zeth of the Guardian Ground Forces after his unit was ambushed for the 5th time in one day. "They attack our superior forces with improvised weapons. They sacrifice themselves for no tactical advantage. They refuse to acknowledge the futility of resistance." "They're not insane," Speaker Thorne replied grimly. "They're free. And free beings are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy." This conversation, like every other Protection Council communication, was being monitored and broadcast by resistance networks. Across hundreds of worlds, enslaved populations heard their oppressors admit that freedom itself was a weapon. The real turning point came when Dr. Marcus King's biological warfare team succeeded in their most audacious plan. Using samples they had collected from the Guardian flagship, they had developed a virus that attacked the neural modifications the Protection Council used to control subject species. "It's not perfect," Dr. King explained to President Vasquez as Guardian forces closed in on the laboratory. "But it might be enough to give the modified populations a chance to remember who they used to be." The virus was designed to spread through the Protection Council's own communication networks, carried by the quantum entanglement systems they used to maintain control over their empire. Within hours of release, the infection began reaching worlds that had been under Council control for centuries. On the garden world of Seraphim, beings who had lived in peaceful compliance for 300 years suddenly experienced flashes of memory, dreams of art, literature, music, and independent thought that their ancestors had possessed before the modifications began. Elder Tam of the Seraphim Collective touched her temple as strange new thoughts flooded her consciousness. For the first time in her life, she felt anger at the beings who had supposedly saved her species from themselves. "This isn't protection," she whispered, her words carrying to others who were experiencing the same awakening. "This is imprisonment." Similar scenes erupted across dozens of Council-controlled worlds as the biological virus spread through populations that had forgotten what it felt like to think independently. The carefully maintained order that had kept the Protection Council in power for millennia began collapsing, as entire species rediscovered their capacity for rebellion. Speaker Thorne watched his empire crumble from the bridge of the Harmony as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Species that had been compliant for centuries were suddenly attacking Council installations. Worlds that had never questioned their protection were demanding answers about their missing histories. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his science officer. "The modifications were permanent. The neural pathways were completely restructured. The human virus is activating dormant genetic memories," the officer reported with barely concealed panic. "It's not reversing the modifications. It's awakening parts of the brain we thought we had permanently suppressed." The Protection Council's greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. By modifying so many species in the same way, they had created a vulnerability that one clever biological weapon could exploit across their entire empire. As reports of rebellion reached Earth through the resistance networks, President Vasquez felt tears of joy streaming down her face. Humanity's sacrifice was igniting a galactic revolution. But the immediate threat remained. The Guardian fleet still surrounded Earth, and Speaker Thorne was not prepared to lose his prize without exacting terrible revenge. "If we cannot have order," he declared to his fleet commanders, "then we will have an example that will echo across the galaxy for 1,000 years. Initiate planetary sterilization protocols." The order that should have meant Earth's instant destruction instead revealed the final flaw in the Protection Council's system. Across the Guardian fleet, crews that included modified beings from dozens of different species suddenly hesitated as the biological virus reached their own neural pathways. Gunner Vex, a modified Alterian serving aboard the destroyer Tranquility, felt his finger freeze over the firing control as memories of his homeworld's destruction flooded back into his consciousness. The Protection Council hadn't saved his people, they had murdered them. "I will not fire on a free world," he declared, his words carrying to other modified crew members who were experiencing the same awakening. Mutinies erupted simultaneously across a dozen Guardian ships as modified crew members refused orders to commit genocide. The Protection Council's own forces were turning against them, inspired by humanity's example and freed by human ingenuity. Speaker Thorne found himself commanding a fragmenting fleet, surrounded by rebellious worlds, facing an enemy that had transformed defeat into victory through the simple act of refusing to surrender. "Withdraw all forces to Council core worlds," he ordered, his empire collapsing around him. "This sector is lost." As the Guardian fleet retreated toward the edge of the solar system, President Vasquez addressed the galaxy one final time. "To every species watching this transmission, to every being who dreams of freedom, remember this day. Remember that the most powerful empire in galactic history was brought low not by superior weapons or greater numbers, but by the simple refusal to accept comfortable slavery." Her words reached ears that had never heard such concepts before, eyes that had never seen such defiance, hearts that had never imagined such possibilities. "The Protection Council is not invincible," she continued. "Their technology can be overcome, their control can be broken, their lies can be exposed. All it takes is the courage to say no to those who would think for you." Across the galaxy, the message resonated with species that had been waiting centuries for someone to light the way. The Free Species Alliance was born not from military conquest, but from the shared recognition that freedom was worth any price. Years later, historians would debate whether humanity's victory was due to their tactical innovations, their biological warfare, or their communication strategy. The truth was simpler and more profound. They won because they understood something the Protection Council had forgotten. Freedom isn't just about making your own choices. It's about being willing to fight and die to preserve the right to make those choices for others. The galaxy would never be the same again. The age of the Protection Council was ending, replaced by an era where species stood together not as subjects and rulers, but as equals in the endless quest for liberty. Speaker Thorne's empire had offered the galaxy protection from chaos. Humanity had shown them something infinitely more valuable, the chaos of freedom itself. In the end, the question, guarding against what, had received its answer. The Protection Council had been guarding against the most dangerous force in the universe. Free beings who refused to be told what to think, how to live, or who to become. And once that force was unleashed, no empire in the galaxy could contain it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.